the Sovereignty Act does is assert our areas of jurisdiction. We want to be treated just like Quebec. That's what the Sovereignty Act is. It's putting the federal government on notice. We intend to defend our constitutional jurisdiction and defend the rights of our citizens.
I like Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act. Is it perfect? No. It's got some flaws, and one big one that I'll talk about in a second. And do I think it's going to radically change the relationship between the federal government and the provinces? Probably not, although I think over time it is going to change the way the feds pass legislation without thinking first about what the provinces will think about it. But it is a good piece of legislation from the standpoint of morale in Alberta. Now, an awful lot of people say, look, you in Alberta, you got a lot of oil, you got a lot of money, you got the highest per capita incomes, you got reasonable housing prices. It's a great place to work and live and raise a family. What are you complaining about? I'll give you an idea of what it is that irks us about this. For instance, just before the 2019 election, the federal government passed a law banning tanker traffic off the west coast of Canada. Now, first of all, it didn't ban tanker traffic off the east coast where Quebec's oil comes from. But if you read that law carefully, it really only banned Alberta oil off the west coast of Canada. And we're tired of being singled out and made the fall guy for everything that people in Confederation don't like. The other example is, about 6 months ago, the federal government brought down its new green plan to reduce emissions dramatically by 2030 and to get to net zero by 2050. The emissions reductions demanded of the oil and gas industry, 42%. The emissions reductions demanded of the transportation sector and of the auto industry, 20%. 20% for those industries that are important in central Canada, 42% for the industries that are important in Western Canada. That's what irks people in Alberta. Now, this new Sovereignty Act does two things that I think are quite interesting. First of all, it reverses the onus. If the federal government wants to bring in a law that the province thinks is unconstitutional, the province of Alberta will not abide by it until the feds go to court and get an order saying that it is constitutional and we must abide by it. Right now, if the feds bring something in that any province, Alberta included, doesn't think is constitutional, it's up to the province to take the feds to court. This switches around our strategy on that. And it also says that the provincial government may do things like tell the federal government, if it's going to have a handgun ban, that no Alberta police force, no police force paid for by the Alberta government is going to participate in any confiscations. Those are sorts of things that already exist. We don't need this law, perhaps, to do that. Those powers already exist in the Constitution. But it's nice to have them written down, and it's nice to see the province pushing back harder against Ottawa. This bill grants the provincial government, the provincial cabinet, the ability to change laws by decree if it thinks it's in the best interest of Alberta when fighting Ottawa. The government says, no, we would never do that in a dictatorial way. We'd only ever do it through a resolution of the legislature, to which I say, look, if you're going to bring the legislature back for a resolution, then make an amendment to the law. Why do you give the cabinet decree power? I don't like that aspect to it. But in general, the Sovereignty Act, I think, is a reasonable response to Alberta's position as a whipping boy for the federal government for the last 30 or 40 years. For Post Media, I'm Lorne Gunter.